Hello, this is a tight right bite with A. LeVay. Let's look at poetic weed, a literary tool handier than a trowel. Poetry is language at its most distilled and most powerful. Poet Rita Dove. Quoted here from the literary journal Bass Blue. Poetic weeding defined. It's a literary technique for revising poetry that can be used to finely tune sections of fiction. I wouldn't recommend using a poetic weed on an extended piece of fiction, but it works well for fine tuning a scene or for an entire piece of flash fiction. Let's look at how it's done. How exactly do we distill our language? By activating our verbs, eliminating the weedy words like prepositions, adverbs, articles, and conjunctions, fertilizing details, trellising lines, testing texture, and examining your palate. Activate your verbs. By this, you're weeding out was, were, or to be verbs whenever necessary. The rule for this is if weeding out the to be verb makes it tight and clear and crisp, good on you. If, on the other hand, weeding it out makes the line more awkward, then to be it is. Keep the was were verb. On the other hand, you want to use verbs that show action and have great sound quality. Let's look at an example. He was so tired becomes he slumped into the sediment of slumber, using the technique of activating verbs. You also notice that I used the repetition of slumber, sediment, and slumped. And this adds a sound quality. You'll also notice that we have the S at the beginning and hard endings with D, T, and R. Paying attention to the sound quality is extremely important in poetic weeding poetry. Eliminate the weedy words. Eliminating prepositions, adverbs, articles, and conjunctions is a great way to distill and tighten your poetic language, whether it's in fiction or in poetry. And the rule of thumb is only weed it out if it makes the language more concise and crisp and experiential. If it makes it awkward, try another approach. Using this technique, he slumped into the sediment of slumber becomes slumping into slumber's sediment. The second version is tighter, more in the moment and direct. Fertilize your details. He was so tired he forgot things, struggled to pay attention, and snoozed on the way home is all true, but more told than shown. It also doesn't have as much attention to things like rhythm, sound quality, and detail. It's a little bit more told than shown. Let's see what could happen. Slumping into slumber's sediment scattered his memory like sand, grinding away attentive points, drifting among his fogged thoughts. Subway seated, he fades into sleeping waves. Here, we have a stronger sense of detail, a stronger sense of being in the moment. We have a grounding in place. And the cadence and rhythm of this poem also emulates the fatigue it's describing. Now, I'd like to point out this really isn't a poem, it's a stanza of a poem, and it's just one version of how you might rewrite what you're trying to describe. And when it comes to poetic weeding, keep in mind you're not going for the answer, you're going for a answer. So feel free to continue to explore other word choices and line structures that might be helpful. Speaking of line structure, let's look at trellising your lines. When you trellis a line, you're creating a trellis, the structure that goes out on the outside of a house or in a garden to allow flowers to grow up it. And so you're testing the strength of your poem by looking at the openings and endings. So here, if you look at the openings of the lines in this stanza, we have slumping, scattered, grinding, drifting, subway, sleeping. All of these are clear, concrete, and give um, an image or an idea or an experience to the reader. If we move to the endings, we have sediment, sand, points, thoughts, into, and waves. Into is a soft ending, but it's important to note that all endings don't have to be strong. In certain poems, the soft endings are completely fitting. If the softness fits meaning or theme, then keep it. This we can examine with fades into works perfectly because it is softening the poem and as the person falls asleep. Now let's look at how with trellising, you don't necessarily need that in fiction, but texture is very important in fiction. Um, Texture is the sentence variety, paragraph length, and use of white space. The texture in this particular scene or section of a scene is appropriate to what's happening. This is from a novel I'm working on called Far From Elementary, which at this point takes place with a British character who says, "Spinning, I found myself face to face with a man I did not recognize. A kitchen that was foreign to, in a kitchen that was foreign to me, with nothing more than a butter knife at the ready. Who the hell are you?" The man turned. The far deadlier braid he gripped in his hand. "Sheer!" I yelled in a most undignified British toaster-loving sort of way. The man rounded the island in front of me, balanced on the balls of his feet, arms out, ready for a fight. "Stay back!" I shouted. "Or what? You'll butter me?" Lunging forward, he struck for my abdomen, and I backpedaled, flinging the toaster hard, sending the hot metal into the side of his head. So here we have an intense scene. If the paragraphs were long and dense, it wouldn't be fitting to the pacing and tension of what's happening. Sorry for my awkward reading there. And by the way, Sheer in this case is another character, so he's calling for help. Last, let's look at testing your palette. When you test your palette, you want to, in a garden, you're looking at how the colors of the flowers you've chosen fit together. And in poetry or fiction, you're looking at how your word choices fit the theme or message or tone of your poem. For this, you look at the strongest verbs and nouns in your stanza, poem, or paragraph or scene. So we have slumping, slumber, sediment, scattered, memory, sand, grinding, points, drifting, fogged, subway, seated, fades, sleeping, waves. I think I threw an adjective or two in there. But my point being is that most of the words, strong words used in this stanza fit with the fatigue that is the center point of the stanza. If, on the other hand, there were words that did not fit, like beatific, then you would want to ask yourself, okay, does that really fit in the palette of this poem? If it doesn't, then weed it out. I hope this short talk on how to do a poetic weed has been helpful to you. Just send me a note if you have any questions. I'm here to help you literary gardeners. This has been a Tight Right Bite by A. LaFay.